Uzbekistan upgrades its labor standards. What do we know about elimination of child and forced labor? For the last several years, Uzbekistan has been remaining a focus of American human rights advocates and international organizations criticizing the government for the lack of efforts in eliminating child and forced labor in cotton production. Due to forced labor in cotton harvest, US Department of State placed Uzbekistan in Tier 3 in its annual Trafficking in Person (TIP) report, along with other countries that do not fully meet the minimum standards for the elimination of trafficking and are not making significant efforts to do so. The annual report of the US Department of Labor on the worst forms of child labor also considers Uzbekistan as the country with widespread use of child labor in cotton industry. While the report admits the steps the Uzbekistan's government has taken in order to completely eliminate this problem, DOL labels it as one out of 8 countries that saw no advancement in this sphere. At the same time, findings of these reports and widespread criticism of Uzbekistan by human rights organizations do not always reflect the actual situation in the country and cannot keep up with the real changes that took place in this area. International Labour Organization and World Bank have monitored 2017 cotton harvest campaign in Uzbekistan, interviewed more than 3,000 people, visited about 500 schools, medical facilities and enterprises. As a result, the representatives of these organizations recognized the efforts by the government not to attract the students, healthcare and education workers to cotton campaign, raising salaries for cotton picking, attracting unemployed population to this work. ILO also suggested to the government continue the current course of measures, increase responsibility for violation related to the use of forced labor, as well as attract the civil society to monitor the cotton campaign. Special advisor to ILO Director General Kari Tapiola and manager to Europe and Central Asia at the World Bank, Nina Pat, recognized the progress in elimination of child and forced labor. One of the key factors is the political will of President Mirziyoyev to protect labor rights and the commitment of the government of Uzbekistan to fully implement the ILO conventions. Moreover, US President Donald Trump underscored the vital steps taken by Uzbekistan towards the real reforms and applauded the progress in eliminating forced child labor in the country. There are a number of independent organizations that also speak in favor of the serious measures adopted in Uzbekistan to overcome the risks on the way of completely eradicating child and forced labor in the cotton fields. Obviously, this progress is ignored by many international observers who used to make their business based on politically motivated approach or existing stereotypes about Uzbekistan. However, some organizations do not follow the pattern and tend to check information about child and forced labor practices in this country. So let's look at some of the facts that prove inconsistent with the conclusions of US government reports and allegations of human rights activists. First, the results of monitoring of Uzbekistan's agricultural sector during cotton harvest period by international organizations in the past several years demonstrated full elimination of child labor in the country. The unacceptability of child labor is recognized by all sections of society: authorities, teachers, specialists, farmers, parents and children themselves. Uzbekistan has phased out organized child labor. No incidences of child and forced labor were identified with regards to World Bank-supported agriculture, water and education projects in Uzbekistan. Project sites operate in a similar context and share similar risks of child or forced labor to that of others. The latest report of Human Rights Watch, prepared on the in-person interviews and observations during the visit to Uzbekistan of representatives of this organization, does not mention the issue of child labor in Uzbekistan. Second, European Union has admitted Uzbekistan's progress in eradicating child and forced labor in cotton industry and removed restrictions for bilateral textile trade. In 2016, European Parliament gave its consent to include Uzbekistan's textile in the EU-Uzbekistan Partnership and Cooperation Agreement and backed a textile trade deal with Uzbekistan. This decision was passed by 564 votes to 100, with 41 abstentions. Members of European Parliament welcomed the fact that Uzbekistan has fully eradicated child labor in the past 3 years and reduced forced labor in cooperation with the ILO. This consent is the result of the progress and commitments made by Uzbekistan in the fight against forced and child labor. But as adult forced labor remains a strong concern, members of European Parliament will follow the situation closely, and if there are serious human rights violations or any regrets on this issue, will not hesitate to ask the Council and the Commission to suspend the entire partnership agreement. Press release of European Parliament, December 14, 2016. Third, Independent sources admit that the government of Uzbekistan has done significant work in eliminating forced labor in cotton production. In close cooperation with ILO, Uzbekistan has elaborated and implemented the Decent Work Country Program for 2013-2016 that was extended to 2020. For a short period of time, 5 years, Uzbekistan has ratified 14 conventions of ILO, significantly improved public awareness of prohibited labor practices through a nationwide communications campaign, reduced the area of cotton fields by 2020 to 14.5%, diversified agriculture sector by increasing the production of fruit and vegetable crops by 3 times. Since 2014, Uzbekistan is not mentioned in the list of states that has serious shortcomings in observations of ILO conventions. The significant development in agricultural sphere show that Uzbekistan can end the decade-long practice of mobilizing massive forced labor to harvest cotton. Human Rights Watch report, October 25, 2017. First time in the history of independent Uzbekistan, the Parliamentarian Commission on Ensuring Guaranteed Labor Rights of Citizens was created based on the Senate decree. One of the priority activities of Commission is to provide the participation of non-state, non-profit organizations and other civil society institutions in the implementation of public oversight over compliance of local municipalities and farms with the national legislation and international labor standards. Fourth, Uzbekistan is implementing market instruments in the agricultural sphere as a practical means of consistent reduction of hand-picking and prevention of forced labor. Starting from 2018, about 85% of Uzbekistan's cotton will be harvested by machines produced by US companies John Deere and CNH Industrial, and that will not affect the quality of the harvested crops. The level of mechanization in the agriculture will approach 100% in the coming years in order to exclude the possibility of use of forced labor. In 2017, Uzbekistan has started implementation of the pilot projects in some of the regions that is aimed at achieving responsible cotton production, consistent with sustainability, the use of best practices and traceability in the supply chain. The goal is to demonopolize the cotton production, its processing and making and use textile goods, transferring them to private companies that will use the cluster approach, full cycle. Based on the results, the government of Uzbekistan is committed to implementing this new market mechanism all over the country in order to leave behind the problems of forced labor. The above-mentioned facts are just the results of surface-based analysis of the current and recent developments in Uzbekistan and its approach towards solving the issues in the sphere of protecting labor rights. It has always been difficult to find the truth in the flow of big data that contains a lot of biased and stereotypical inputs. However, no one can deny the progress achieved thanks to systematic efforts and commitment of Uzbekistan's government to complete eradication of child and forced labor.